Lyon Share Podcast with our host, Ed Lyon. Ed, it's Q&A time, and I'm excited.
It's Q&A time, and I'm especially excited about the topic. So I've mentioned in a couple of broadcasts, about 3 weeks ago, I discovered Claude and Claude Cowork, and it has transformed how I create content in my business just in that 3 week period. And I've gotten a couple of questions on AI, one on the IRS and AI, one on me and AI. So given your expertise in that topic, I thought we would just have a fun discussion on
No,
those
I,
questions.
I think it's fun. And so you got to Claude Cowork before me. I taught you about Claude and I taught you about
Yes.
other large language models because I'm sure you're like, oh, mostly chat. Everyone thinks chat GBT. And that's not the case. You really have to be, I guess, agnostic when it comes. Don't be agnostic. Make sure you have multiple large language
Right.
models you jump on, not just
hmm
stick on one because one could lose or one might not do what you need to do. So our question, and so I jumped on Claude Cowork, and I got 9 agents working in the background at times, and it's doing so many different things for me. I heard it could build websites. I'm really excited about the possibilities.
Yeah,
I
we're gonna talk about what it's
yeah,
done for me.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so what are your thoughts on the IRS using AI to find audit targets?
I think it's much ado about nothing right now. So there have been a couple of stories in the news. One about Palantir working with the IRS to identify audit targets. Palantir is working with everybody in the government. They're the IT department for Big Brother. But that's a that is a development that we can't stop. The government getting more information about us. So, when it comes specifically to the IRS, let's talk about how AI may be better at extracting money from taxpayers, but also why it's not something to worry about quite yet. One of the great mysteries of life is how the IRS picks someone to audit. And there's a method, there's a science behind it. The IRS uses a program called the discriminant information function. And what it's doing is when you submit your tax return, the return gets submitted to the computer, and the DIF looks at your return and it compares it to similar returns. For example, if you are a dentist and you file a return with the 6-digit SIC code for being a dentist, it's going to compare your return against other dentists. It's not going to compare your return against a manufacturing company or a restaurant or an Etsy vendor or something like that. And so that makes sense. What the discriminant information function is looking at is specific items of income and mostly expense, and it's comparing them to other expenses. So if the average dentist spends 12% of his gross revenue on his office, that's something that the IRS can pick up. And they're going to look, when they look at your return, they're going to say, how much of your gross revenue are you spending on your office? If it's 12% or 10 or 14, fine, no problem. If it's 44%, if it's 60%, well, if you're 2 or 3 standard deviations out of the norm, that's unusual. So the IRS is looking for large, unusual, and questionable items. So the computer kicks out the return and a human being looks at it. So it's a statistical scoring system. It's been around for decades. Can we improve on that? Well, AI, they're using AI now. They're testing AI, and odds are pretty good that AI is going to have a little better vision than the discriminant information function. So if you are playing fast and loose with the numbers on your return, that could be a problem. But we all know that as good as AI can be in some contexts, it can't do everything. And there is a bottleneck in the IRS that's going to slow down AI no matter how many returns it finds. And that is the fact that once a return is selected for audit, some human has to manage that process. Now, most audits these days are done by correspondence. The IRS sends you an audit notice, and they say, we want verification. and they'll send a request for documents and things like that. They'll want the information. They're not going to necessarily come out to your office or your house and go through your shoebox of receipts with you. They're just going to ask you to verify the stuff. But there's got to be somebody handling the audit. And while AI is expanding the number of audit targets, IRS staffing issues, which we've talked about, are narrowing it and bottlenecking it. So at the beginning of last year, there were about 103,000 people working for the IRS. Doge came in at the beginning of the year and it laid people off and it made buyout offers. So a lot of senior federal employees had the opportunity to take a buyout, leave, shut all their files, get paid for 6 months, and look for another job somewhere else. That's what a lot of senior auditors at the IRS did. So the IRS is now down to about 80,000 employees, where they were 103 a year ago, a 20% contraction. That is a big, big shrinkage. And so there just aren't enough people to manage the audits that AI picks. So in my conversations with tax professionals across the country, I'm hearing the same thing. They're not necessarily seeing an uptick in audit notices coming out. AI may be finding all of the tax cheats in the world, but if we don't have the staff to manage the process of bringing them in, it's not something that should concern most people.
Mm.
And most people aren't audit targets in the first place. If you're a firefighter married to an RN and you've got a couple of W-2s and a 1099 for your mortgage, there's nothing for the IRS to audit. So when the IRS looks for audit targets, the biggest priority is finding unreported income. It's much easier to simply not report income in the first place than it is to honestly report your income and come up with a bunch of phony deductions. So who are the people who have the chance to not report their income? It's you and me. It's people who run our own businesses. If you've got a W-2, the government already knows how much you're making because your employer sent the government the same W-2. So it's a small number of potential targets, primarily business owners, primarily operating as a Schedule C. So the audit rates for Schedule C businesses varies anywhere from about 0.5% to 2.5%, depending on the income you make. That's still a really low percentage, 2.5%, one in 40. But if you report your income on an S corp return or a partnership return, the percent of those returns audited drops to less than 0.1%. So it's fascinating. If you're an LLC reporting as a sole proprietor, you may have a 2.5% chance of being audited. Just switch to an S corporation, which is a 3-page form that you file with the IRS, and you're going to cut your audit odds by probably 96%.
Of only that percentage. It's crazy.
Of only that tiny percentage. Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts.
And people think differently. And it was interesting. I was building, and this is an AI conversation.
Yeah.
One of my clients said, "Can you create for me an accountant, basically, that's going to be able to look over difficult tax returns or difficult tax returns before they've been put in, and be able to identify chances of being audited?" And they said there's 22 factors into an audit of potential areas that they look at. And it was building it out for me and saying, put a PDF in and it'll be able to go and tell that. And I said, will you do better than TurboTax? Said, absolutely. We are like an accountant looking over a tax return. What are your thoughts? This is Claude Cowork saying this, building an agent like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's terrific as long as you're getting the right information. So the discriminate information function, that's the most secret number in the government. That's probably more secret than the nuclear codes, right? Years ago, I think it was in 1978, a senior at Princeton University wrote a thesis. He was a physics student at Princeton, and he wrote a senior thesis on how to build an atom bomb. And he turned it in, and the CIA showed up the next day and said, your thesis is classified. But that was something that a college student could do 40 years ago versus this is a very heavy statistical analysis of all of the returns that the IRS gets. Claude's not going to have that data. Claude's not going to be able to extract that data and meaningfully make a conclusion of it. Now, with your person that you were just talking about, who understands the 22 factors, they're not going to be able to give you a precise odds, but they'll be able to get pretty close. But even then, how useful is that? If you know that your return is 4% likely to get audited, is that going to change your behavior for a 1 in 25 chance? At what point does your behavior change? The IRS does not want you to know how likely your return is to get audited because a little dose of fear goes a long way. They want the uncertainty to motivate taxpayers to play by the rules.
Interesting. Okay. That's an interesting thing. And the 22 factors, if you don't mind me asking that question, what are those 22 factors? What does that mean? That, like, they look in specific, like, things you were mentioning before, for a Schedule C areas to look
Yeah,
at?
I couldn't tell you what those
Oh,
specific
oh,
22 factors are. That's somebody who has done a lot more work with audits than I have, but they're going to look for overstated charitable contributions, for example. They're going to look for uh, business income that doesn't jibe with other businesses, the same sort of stuff that they're looking at with the discriminate information function. There is a strategy, a specific strategy, and we've discussed it on the Lyon Share, called captive insurance when we had Randy Sadler from CIC Services. The IRS can look at a business's tax return and see how much they're paying for insurance, because contributions to a captive insurance company get deducted on the same line as premiums that you pay to Jake from State Farm and Flo from Progressive. So they can see, oh, this return is showing 15% or 8% or whatever of their income going to insurance. That's going to tip them off that possibly there is captive insurance at play.
okay.
That doesn't mean that the taxpayer is doing anything wrong. They're just using their statistical models to identify large, unusual, and questionable items.
Okay. All right. Now a really AI question involving Ed. How are
Yeah.
you seeing AI affecting people in your business, and how is it affecting you? And is it making you stronger or weaker?
So that's a great question, especially this time of year, because there are a lot of people who assume that AI could simply do their tax returns. And a good AI might be able to do a simple tax return. We're not at the point where you can simply upload all the information and ask AI to do the return. We may be getting closer to that point, but again, I talked earlier about the example of the nurse married to the firefighter with the two W-2s and the mortgage interest. They're not likely to get audited, and that's a pretty simple return that AI may be able to handle. But if you've got a complicated return, if you've got multiple business entities, if you've got multiple partnerships that own real estate, if you're into alternative investments where you're getting 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 K1s from different partnerships to do your returns, all of those are subject to different limits and phase outs and things like that. AI is not at the point where it can do that. But let's talk about how AI is affecting broader people in the tax preparation world. So there are millions of Americans who could do their tax returns on their phone. As a matter of fact, TurboTax has an app where you can scan a picture of your W-2 and it'll do your taxes for you, for really simple people. There are middle income, middle class, upper middle class people who AI is not ready to do their taxes yet, but it's getting there. And then there are people, truly high net worth people with complicated returns, or even just people with complicated returns, whether they're making money or not. AI is not ready for prime time with those people. So what we're seeing is a K-shaped economy for taxes. You may have heard of the term the K-shaped economy. So if you're rich in America, you are getting richer right now. And there is an astonishing number of rich people in this country. We'll talk about that in a sec. If you're poor, you're not getting richer. You may be getting poor. So the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poor, the middle class is getting squeezed out. That's the K-shaped economy, and you want to be on the rich upward link of the K-shaped economy. These people don't want AI doing their taxes. They want a person. They want a person who they can call with questions. They want a throat that they can choke if there's a problem. They want human relationships, and they are willing to pay for them. I could record this podcast all by myself. I could upload to YouTube. The ability to do that is there. But I happily pay you every month to produce my podcast because I'm getting a better result and I'm having a better experience doing it, right?
Right.
You're not going to be put out of work by AI.
No.
And there are a lot of jobs that won't be put out of work by AI. If I go to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned, I'm not going to want a robot hygienist with needles in my mouth, right?
Right.
If I need to get a massage because my back is sore and I want a deep tissue massage, I want an actual trained human being doing that for me. I don't want a robot doing that for me. So within the accounting and tax space, working with the higher end clients as I do, I'm seeing people talk about AI and ask about AI, but nobody's ready to turn the work over to AI. And realistically, there are enough wealthy people in America to support a lot of tax planners and a lot of high-end tax preparers. So the Wall Street Journal did a story last week about the number of quiet rich people. You would think, Neil, unless you're worth $30 million, that somebody with a net worth of $30 million is pretty rich, top of the food chain, right?
Right.
So how many American households would you guess have a net worth of $30 million or more? Putting you on the spot.
I'll say 10,000.
430,000.
Okay.
470,000 of them have a net worth of $100 million or higher.
And where are they located? Just kidding.
Right. And you know, where are the recently divorced single women in that group? That's what I'm looking for. So yeah, 70,000 families with a net worth of $100 million or more, 430,000 families with a net worth of $30 million or more. And the percentage of those families who don't want a human being supervising the AI, I think is probably pretty minuscule.
Because they're willing to pay $30,000 for a hamburger, meaning some of them that are very wealthy. They're willing to go to a restaurant and spend $10,000 sometimes.
Yeah, they'll go to St. Bart's and they'll drop $100,000 at a nightclub for New Year's Eve. And that's a small fraction. But the guy who's going to St. Bart's and dropping $100,000 on bottle service at a nightclub for New Year's Eve wants a guy. He wants to be able to say, I've got a guy. And frankly, he wants to be able to say, my guy is the best. My guy is the most expensive. There are people in this world who want to pay the highest possible price because it makes them feel good about themselves.
Right.
And who am I to stand in the way of them feeling good about themselves? So I don't worry about AI taking the work away. Now, let me shift gears. It is making me unbelievably more productive. And I talk about Claude Cowork because that's what I'm using, but I know I have friends who love Grok. I have friends who are still happy with ChatGPT. I hear lots of great things about Google's AI. Every time I turn on a Microsoft file, it bugs me and says, "Do you want to use Copilot?" So lots of different platforms, and like you said, it's important to be agnostic about them. ChatGPT was the first one that I paid for. I'm now no longer paying for ChatGPT, although I will use it for some simple queries and stuff like that. But what am I doing with Claude? I have a PowerPoint that I use with my clients and my classes that includes separate, unique slides for about 50 different strategies. these are not all basics like S corporation or the Augusta rule. I hosted a call this afternoon for a group of about 30 CPAs. And one CPA, who is a longtime member of my group, said, "Holy moly, I've never heard of half of this stuff. Where can I learn about it?" So it's great. It's a PowerPoint presentation, meaning I'm screwing around with the different slides. Well, I sat down with Claude and I said, make every slide consistent. Then I started having Claude make infographics to illustrate concepts with flow charts and that sort of stuff. And Claude very effortlessly did all of that. But then,
Infographics, that's big.
yeah,
I didn't know about that one because that's a great tool for posting on Pinterest or posting on X to create infographics.
yeah,
Interesting.
a picture is worth 1,000 words. Claude's doing a good job, but there are specific tools. Google has a specific tool. I can't remember the name of
Nano
it.
Banana.
Yeah, right. That does infographics.
Oh, see, I didn't know it did
No.
info.
Oh,
So you're
maybe
talking
maybe
the
it's
infographics, the ones that have like the whole.
the flow charts and all
I
that
didn't know
sort of
that.
stuff.
I didn't know that. So
Maybe it may not be Nano Banana.
I think it is Nano because it does really good images. So
Yeah.
that probably is potentially with doing infographics. I see Claude more in the business side of things, guys,
Mhm.
than any of the others. Where like you ask it to create a book cover, you got to go to ChatGPT. You got to go to
Right.
Grok. But if you ask Claude to do certain things that are business oriented, they're doing it more. So that's probably it.
So here's what I did this weekend, and here's what got me so excited. I have this PowerPoint. It's a great tool, but if I want to customize it, if I want to drop savings estimates into it, I've got to calculate them by hand and drop it in, or I've got to use another software. And I would use something called Tax Architect, which is a software that I developed for TMN, Taxmaster Network, originally 21 years ago. And I could run the numbers through TMN, Tax Architect, and drop them into my PowerPoint. But I asked Claude, I said, can you take this PowerPoint and turn it into an actual calculating program with live calculations? And it thought for a few seconds and said, absolutely. I can't do it within PowerPoint, but I can create a companion spreadsheet in Excel, pair the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet can do the live calculations. And then if you tell me where the results of those calculations should go, we'll do it. And I said,
Wow.
that's awesome. Do that. I dropped in the formulas from the tax architect, which I had, and it took maybe 15 minutes, and it gives you progress reports. I'm reading your spreadsheet. I'm reading your PowerPoint. I'm pairing up. I'm matching. Do you want me to try 10 first for proof of concept, or do you want me to do all 50 strategies? I said, do 10 first for proof of concept. And by the end of that task, it had a spreadsheet and it was gorgeous. And it took all of the input and mapped it. And there were some font problems. So I said, oh, use the same font. And it went in and said, okay, I see where I missed this. And my 10-point font was overriding your 16-point font. I said, I don't want to use every strategy, every presentation. So can you give me a column with checkboxes for yes or no, whether you want to include this strategy or not? And if I don't check the box to include the strategy, don't include it in the PowerPoint. Yeah, no problem. 3 minutes, that facility existed. It set up the checkboxes so that they were all checked yes. I said, no, set up so the default is no, so that I only have to check the boxes that I'm using and I don't have to uncheck the ones that I'm not using. Then I said to it, can we set up a facility so that I can upload a PDF of a tax return and you'll pull the numbers directly from that tax return and do the populate for me? Just unbelievable how quickly it could do this. When I supervised creating Tax Architect, the original program back in 2005, I had a programmer work 8 hours a day for 5 months before that program existed. And Claude recreated it in less time than it took to air fry some French fries for a
Right.
snack that night. Unbelievable. So yeah, that's sort of a business function. It's not like generating images. It's not
Right.
generate. I wouldn't ask Claude to generate audio or generate video the way Sora did before
And Sora,
ChatGPT
can
shut
you
it
believe
down.
that? Can you believe that went under? So
Uh,
yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't know the energy use behind Sora. Apparently, my understanding is Sora just uses so much more energy to generate video than it
yeah.
does.
Google has it and it's really good and it's way better. So Google's
Yeah,
Flow. So
but
there's just so many different things, guy. But no, I agree with you.
it's the idea of those agents. So Claude Cowork has skills, so I can teach it a skill. One of the skills is when I'm done with a call with a client, I do my plan deliveries on Zoom. So Zoom at the end of the call, a couple minutes after the call, I've got a transcript of the call. I have a skill in Claude. I can take the transcript of the call and I can tell Claude to prepare a next steps memo, and it's going to analyze from the transcript the conversation, and it's going to list out, here's your first priority, here's your second priority, and it's going to give me a very nice graphically attractive table that's going to say here's what you're doing and here's when you're going to do it. Those are very useful business functions that are going to make me more productive because I will have more time in front of people. Highest and best use of my time is when I'm in front of people, not
Yeah.
when I'm
That's me
creating a
too.
plan or something.
That's me too. Like I met a celebrity today. If I could be in front of calls all day like you, I would be and not have to do any work. I would be really in great shape. And that's the goals. And AI is finally giving me that possibility.
Right.
And it helps that small business owner get to a certain point where then you have an SOP and you have automations and all these different things that you can hire somebody like a VA that could take care of all those things. It
Right.
gives you a much better chance to run your business with more precision and accuracy, right or
hmm
wrong.
Right, absolutely. And let me push back respectfully on something that you said in jest, but you said being in front of people instead of working. So it feels like work when you're sitting at your laptop doing things that a VA or an AI agent can do for you. But that's a commodity. The information that I have, for example, if I am so part of what I do is I'm a knowledge broker.
Right.
I have 50 magic beans in a PowerPoint presentation that can help you pay less tax. And a CPA with 30 years experience on a call today said, holy moly, I haven't heard of half of your magic beans. So part of my value traditionally has been as an information broker. But information is very quickly becoming a commodity.
Right.
Information technical competence is a commodity. When I designed Tax Architect 21 years ago, it was the only game in town. Now there are sites where you can go for free and plug in your tax information, and it will generate the same kind of plan that I can generate. It
Yes.
probably won't be as good as mine because I have 20 years of experience doing plans, but it will be credible. And so a prospect might reasonably ask, why would they pay me tens of thousands of dollars to do a plan when they can get the document for free from AI? And the answer is, and I took this question to Claude and I showed Claude examples of what I do, the classes that I teach, the plans that I generate, and I said, where am I most at risk from AI? And Claude said, the information is a commodity. Everybody's got the information. What they don't have is experience. What they don't have is reputation. What they don't have is personality. CNN called me the funniest tax guy in America, nobody else. Neil, you've got a personality. You've got relationships with your co hosts, you've got relationships with your guests. You are the media giant.
Right.
AI is not the media giant.
No.
So it's the relationships that are going to keep us healthy in an AI economy.
Right.
And that was what Claude said to me was, I've got a body of work, I've got a reputation, and I am doing things that AI doesn't do. So I do a plan, AI can do the plan. Does AI have a team of vendors? People like Randy Sadler on The Captive or Brad Etheridge on the ESOP? Does AI have a network of vendors and relationships where when I see the ESOP opportunity, AI is going to bring in Brad?
Right.
No, AI
You
doesn't do
don't.
that. AI has never supervised implementation of a plan. If a tax return gets audited, Has AI ever defended a client in an audit? Has AI ever argued in tax court and won a case? No, AI has not done any of that stuff, which is why I don't worry about losing my income. I know that what I do has to
Right.
change and is going to have to change. And I'm having fun with Claude because I'm just enough of a nerd that I really get into that stuff. And that's why I like nerding out with you when we talk about AI.
Now, and I'm going to get to this point that I think that the mistake people make is AI can make you so much better, more productive, more knowledgeable, ahead of your field and everything. And so if you are a CPA or a financial advisor and you become the top 1% in AI, because you and I are in the top 1% in AI, you wouldn't believe that, but it's true that most people do not know what we know in AI.
No.
And I probably am 0.5%, but I'm not
Oh,
going
you're
to.
way ahead of me.
I'm not going to. I'm not a tech guy. Well, there's other people. I just have a personality, and that's the thing I've seen is okay. If this happens, my professional worth of consulting with AI will keep me going for a certain time till I get to the next phase. And but
Right.
personal relationships is going to keep this going.
Yeah.
And if you're a CPA firm, or you got to learn not just to have somebody else teach you AI. I mean, you got to learn AI. You got to master AI because at one point your client's going to ask you, "Why am I going to pay you when AI could do this for me?" And you have to be able to show them
Right.
why that's not the case. Commodity. It's interesting. If we're in a commodity world and we commoditize what we do, Ed, we're going to be the race to the bottom. But
Right.
when we differentiate ourselves that there's no one else that compares to us,
Mhm.
like, yeah, you can get a podcast producer, but you're never going to get somebody who can cover a conversation syndicated on their radio show so they're branded more and be able to teach them at the same time. You're not going to find that. That's what you got to be as a business.
Right.
Don't be in a commodity world. Be
No.
able to be
No.
that your
And
offers unstoppable.
and
Good.
that comes back to the K-shaped economy. So the people in the on the bottom rung of the K, they're unfortunately going to have to be satisfied with commodity service providers because they don't have the money to buy someone who can create a bespoke plan. It's the people who can afford a bespoke plan who are going to be willing to pay for it. They're going to assume that I'm using AI as a tool to become more productive. Why are they going to assume that? Because that's what they're doing in their own businesses. So they're using AI to become better. I'm using AI to become better. They know I'm using AI to become better, but they're still hiring me for all of those non-commodity, intangible reasons. And it's fascinating when you look at different sectors of society and different sectors of the economy and project them out. I've talked with people in education about schools who think that 20 years from now, poor kids are going to get screens instead of teachers, but rich kids are going to have really good teachers. And the middle class may have schools kind of chunking along, but if your education is coming from a screen, it's not going to be the same as coming from a real teacher. I still remember how much I loved my second grade teacher, and I still remember what a monster my third grade teacher was. I had a classmate who hated the third grade teacher, Mrs. Oldham, so much that she ended up repeating third grade and was always a year behind us after that. So,
Yeah.
uh, 20 years from now, when nobody wants to pay any taxes and schools don't have the financing because states have eliminated property taxes and stuff, there's going to be an underclass of students who are learning from screens,
Yeah.
and the education they get is just not going to be as good as the rich kids who are learning from real teachers with enrichment opportunities and who don't need to be in the classroom all the time. So maybe they take a 3 week sabbatical in the spring and they go to Spain to learn Spanish in ninth
Right.
grade. The possibilities are, I think, amazing.
Yeah.
I am a fan of Scott Galloway, who says that AI has the worst marketing proposition of any industry. And their marketing proposition is, hey, look, there's a 25% chance that our product is going to kill off all of humanity. But if it doesn't do that, you're going to lose your job. But I don't, and I know there are people who are losing jobs to AI slowly but surely. I think it's overstated. When I come across an article that says 50% of white collar jobs may be gone in 12 to 18 months, No, I don't worry about that. I've seen how large language models can do stuff and where they don't do stuff accurately. I'm not worried that Skynet is going to become self-aware and send the Terminator to us anytime soon. But it's a business tool. It's like the internet. I can remember a time before the internet, and then when the World Wide Web first came out and Netscape was the first browser, and how it transformed our lives really in a pretty short period of time. We are in one of those periods now.
No doubt. And that's the thing I see also, that you're not going to replace certain jobs, but if you're in a profession and you do not adopt AI, you will lose your job. But if
You'll
you're in a
lose, yeah, you'll,
profession,
mhm,
or someone better in AI will take it. Even a plumbing job,
mhm,
even any job. Yes, you'll be able to have that skill set. But what if they put a robot in to be able to do all the digging and do 90% more houses?
mhm,
And that expert in the plumbing's just doing that one thing, the real difficult parts, but having another laborer who's an AI robot doing it. So, what my
mhm.
recommendation is, if you're not adopting AI and being all in on AI, you will be replaced.
Right. You don't need to be an expert in how AI works. Someone used the analogy with me last week. They said, you don't need to know how the watch works. You just need to know how to tell, you need to know what time it is. Well, with AI, you got to learn how to tell time. You need to be able to know that the big hand goes in one direction, the little hand goes in another direction, and you're not just looking at a digital clock. And I've heard scary stories about how children in America, some of them don't know how to tell time on a clock.
Right.
uh, those they are not going to be part of the AI overlords if they don't learn how to tell time. So, I don't need to necessarily learn how it works. I'm asking questions. My PowerPoint and spreadsheet. Claude mentioned Python a couple of times when it was talking about
Mhm.
what it was doing. I said, "What is Python?" So I'm going to use Python to pack my stuff into an app, and it'll be an app that does all of that stuff. I don't need to know I don't need to become an expert in Python, but I need to know what the tools are and how to use them, and whether I like it or not
Yep.
for what I'm doing.
All right. Well, that was a great conversation on AI. Anything else to add, Ed?
No, until things change and we come back and we have another
It changes.
conversation
I'm
on
already
AI in
working
2 months.
on launching OpenClaw
Okay,
and seeing what happens there. I have AI virtual assistants working for me on simple tasks with a great software. It's Don't mention that software because I control everything, and
okay,
just basically putting all those things together, using all the different things and making things happen. And the thing is, if you're willing to learn, you could write business plans. You could do so many different things. So you can't be a one trick pony anymore. You really have to figure out, and you got to look at your value. And Alex
hmm,
Ramosi wrote a book called 100 million dollar offers.
hmm,
And he says, don't be commoditized or it's
no,
going to be a race to the bottom.
yep,
That's it. And I wish I learned that a long time ago, but I think as business owners, we got to evolve till we get to that point. We have
hmm,
to build that expertise till we can charge what we're worth because it doesn't happen overnight. It's a
no,
process of building and growing and developing. And there you
yeah.
go.
And if you're not already on the train, you're falling behind.
Exactly. Okay.
All right,
So remember to like, subscribe to the Lion Share podcast. And we're soon going to have some more Lion Share social media that you guys can follow on Facebook soon and Instagram. We'll have different places. So just be ready and make sure to reach out to Ed anytime. Appreciate it, Ed.
thanks.
All right. That was the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show on the Lion Share podcast, guys. Take care.